Hey everyone, thank you for joining me. I'm a guy called Joe and this is Bootstrapping Tools. Let's Build, where we build various applications using low-code and no-code tools to help scrappy bootstrappers just like yourself figure out how to overcome some of the hurdles that they're facing or just to become more efficient at their job. Now, before we dive into today's topic, make sure to check out our YouTube channel. We got lots of videos up there that go through all different types of applications from Retool to Google Sheets, Google Apps Scripts, Google Data Studio, as well as many others. If you don't see what you're looking for up here, feel free to shoot an email over to feedback@bootstrapping.tools and we'll be happy to take a look at that and make a video just for you. Now, today's topic, we're going to be going over how to create snapshots automatically for your Google Sheets and putting them into a specific Google Drive folder. So for this, we're going to be using a couple of different things. We're going to be using Google Sheets and we're also going to be using Google Drive, and then Google Apps Scripts will be the thing that powers our automation here. So Google Apps Scripts, if you don't know what it is, you haven't used it before, it's really simple. It's just something that Google provides to you, a tool that Google provides to you that lets you create scripts that can help you automate some of your work, just make your work or make your life just easier when working in Sheets or different various applications. It doesn't have to be just for Sheets, but in this case, for today, we're gonna be using it with Google Sheets. So let's dive over to a spreadsheet. I actually just created a demo for it using some sample data that I got online, and this is all just sales data. So we have a bunch of records on the amount of information, sales that you got, and then the order status for that. And by creating log files for this, you can actually compare yesterday's log to today's log, or last month's log to this month's logs, and see what the time difference is for processing orders or fulfilling orders or whatever you might want to do with it. You can imagine that you can do this for basically anything. If you're doing task management, you can do the same thing, or if you just want to measure historically what happens over time to your data sets, you can use this this technique or method that I'm about to show you. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to open up your script editor. If you don't know how to do that, just go up to the top over here under the tools option in your menu bar and then click on script editor. Now I already have one open that's already tied to it. So let's go over here. When you create a new one, you're going to default to my function just as a starting point for you. And because we're opening it from a Google Sheet, it's already connected to each other, so it makes it pretty easy. So for today, we're going to be creating 3 different functions. The first function we're going to create is a create snapshot, which will essentially reference the sales tracker that we created just in here. We're going to look at the sales tab, and then we're going to copy all this data and save it in memory. And then from there, we're going to have another function that essentially grabs the folder that we want, and that folder is going to be in our Google Drive. I actually just created already. I called it sales tracker logs, and then the ID is actually found in the URL, so we can copy that later. And then we're going to create one last function that is essentially going to be doing all the heavy lifting or the work that we want to do, and we'll call that create log file. And that thing is going to call the other functions that we're going to be creating, and then it's going to create a new file, a new Google Sheet, inject the data from our snapshot, and then port that file over to our folder destination, which is the sales tracker logs. So the first thing we're going to do, let's go ahead and rename this. We're going to call it create snapshot. Let's be super clear with the naming. And then here, we're just going to declare a variable SS, short for spreadsheet. I'm going to use the SpreadsheetApp library that Google provides to us. And then from there, we're going to say get active spreadsheet, which essentially means that the spreadsheet that is active that we're using, which is already connected to the script, we're going to make that into a reference for SS, and then we'll be able to use that when we declare the variable sheet. We can do ss.getSheet by name, and the sheet that we want is called sales. Now once we have that, we want to get data out of it, so we're just going to declare another variable. We're going to call that data, and we're going to set that equal to sheet.getDataRange. And now that we have the range of how much data there is in there, we also want to do get values. So before we move on, let's go ahead and just log this out here so we know exactly what we're looking for. And you can do that by saying console.log, and then we'll just say data in here. So go ahead and save this and then run it. And you should see in the console log here all that data that we have, that sales data that we found in the spreadsheet earlier. And before we end here, let's just go ahead and return data. That way we can call this function later and get the data that it was able to grab from the spreadsheet. The next function we're going to create is to get the log folder. So get the log folder. And then we're going to use a new library. Instead of using SpreadsheetApp, we're going to use DriveApp. So let's declare a variable called folder here. I'm going to do DriveApp.getFolder by ID. And then we're going to grab the ID from the folder that I was showing you before. You can find that in the URL. It's just right after the folder / and then you're going to see like a random set of letters and numbers. That's your folder ID. So copy that and just paste it in here as a string. So put those into like single quotes or double quotes, whichever one you prefer. I prefer single quotes. Once you have that, all we need to do is just return the folder. We don't have to do anything else with it, nothing fancy schmancy. Now, this function is where most of the work is going to be done. So we're going to say create log file. And then here, we're going to reference the functions that we just wrote above. So we can say var new log data. And we're going to set that equal to create snapshot. And then make sure to add in those two open and closing parentheses statements to make it so that it knows, the code knows that we're calling a function. Then we're going to declare another variable called destination folder. And we're going to set that equal to get log folder. And I actually have a typo over here. Okay, there, perfect. So now that we have those two, it's time to figure out how we're going to create the files. So the function that we want is going to be with the spreadsheet app. So we can say, let's say log file equals SpreadsheetApp.create. And then now create, it says that we have to give it a name. You can call it whatever you want. I tend to find that best practice is when you're creating log files like this to inject the timestamp or the date so that it's easy to parse out which log is for which time that it was created. So before we actually create that, what we need to do is we need to figure out what the date is. So let's do var date, which equals new date. And this is just a typical JavaScript function here. It's going to output a date value. So actually, before we do this, let's comment out this code so that it doesn't cause any issues. And then let's do console.log, and we'll just log the date, not data, just date. So let's save this, and then we'll select in our debugger up here, make sure to select the function that you want to run. So that's the create log file. And when we run this, we should see the date outputted over here. You can see it's pretty long. You don't need all that information in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to reformat this date into something that's a little bit easier to use as a file name. So the good thing here is that Google gives you the ability to use this library called utilities, and then within there is something called format date. And within this format date, the parameters you will pass it is the date, which we just declared using the new date JavaScript function. And then you have to declare the time zone as well as the format. Time zones is like Eastern Standard, EST or PT or whatever. We're going to use GMT just to, just why not? Essentially, why not? And then we're going to use the format year, month, date, and then hour, minute. You can do whatever you want there. You can just do the date if you're only running a daily. Because we're making a video, I'm going to set it to minute because later on we're going to automate the running of this script so that it generates it every single minute so we can see the output of it. So in here, we're going to say date and then comma, GMT. And then for the format, we're going to say year, hyphen, month, month, hyphen, day, day. And you have to use lowercase y's for this so that it knows that you're using it for the year. I want single quotes here. You need capitalizations for the month because that's just what the format is for it, and then lowercase d's for the date value. And then capital H is for hour, and then colon, because that's how time works, and lowercase m's here for a minute. And that's like a big difference here, where the uppercase m's is for month and lowercase m's for minute. So now that we have the format here, let's go ahead and say var file name equals utilities dot format date and all that. So now the file name is going to be this pretty format. So let's go ahead and log that just so you can see what it looks like. Hit the run button, and now you can see, nice and neat, gives us the year, the date, and then the timestamp. If you want, you can also add to the beginning of it, you can prepend this with sales log hyphen, and then just add a plus symbol to combine these two. So when we do this and we run it, you'll see that it appends or prepends sales log to that file name so that it's nice and easy to read, just in case you have other logs running within your environment. You don't get mixed up with which logs are for what. So now that we have this, we don't need this console log anymore. And then now the log file, and we're going to set the name to file name. And now what we want to do is we want to take that log file, and then we want to inject it with the data that we're grabbing from this create snapshot function. We're going to say log file dot get sheet by name, and whenever you generate a new file, a new Google spreadsheet, what you're going to find is that it always defaults to one tab whose name is sheet 1. So we'll just go ahead and say sheet 1, and then from there we're going to get the range. And we're getting the range because in order to inject data, especially sets of data like this, you need to tell Google, or you need to tell the code what's the area that you want to populate this data into. And get range essentially allows you to set a grid. So if you're familiar with Google Sheets, you have column A, column B, column C, and then different rows in there. So it's kind of like a grid or like a table. So the get range function has 4 parameters that you can pass to it. The first one is the starting row. The second one is the starting column. So by putting in 1 and 1, we're telling the program that we want to start from cell A1. And then the next thing here is going to be the number of rows, and then after that is the number of columns. So because we don't have a definitive like set of rows or set of columns that we know of, we're going to have to reference the new log data up here. So let's take that, copy it down. I'm going to say dot length, and then for the columns we're going to say new log data position 0 because it's a nested array dot length. And essentially what this is doing here is, if you were to imagine what it might look like, you can say, so this is A1, this is B1, and then in the next position within the array is another nested array, which is going to be A2 comma B2. And that's essentially how you need to pass the data through when you're saying get range, and then you're setting values into that range. So now that we have the range, we're going to say set values, and in the values we're going to say new log data, and we're taking the data that we just got from the snapshot and we're going to shove it into the range in sheet 1 starting from position A1. So once we have that, essentially now the log file that we created is going to have the information from the spreadsheet that we just created a snapshot from, and the next step is to use the DriveApp library and say get file by ID, and that's essentially going to be the log file dot get ID, which is just a function that Google provides to us. And then we're going to say move to, which makes it really easy. The DriveApp library just lets you use a function called move to move things around, and in here we're going to say destination folder. So save this, and when we run this, what we expect to happen is it's going to create a snapshot based on our sales tracker spreadsheet, which actually just send it. So this is the data that it's going to create a copy of, create that snapshot of, and then it's going to say go to the folder whose ID is this, and that's essentially this folder right here. And it's going to generate a file name, create a new Google Sheet using that file name, populate that with the snapshot data, and then it's going to move that file over into our destination folder, which is the folder that we were just shown before. Let's go ahead and run this. It's going to do execution started, and because we have no console logs, this should say execution completed. Exactly what we want, perfect. And if we go back to our Google Drive, you'll see here that now we have a data set, and we open this up, it's going to have the same exact data as our sales tracker did the last time that we ran it. Now, if we go into our sales tracker again, let's scroll down to the bottom. Let's say Now everything is processing, nothing is new anymore. And then the next time that we run this script, it's going to copy the snapshot. It's going to create a snapshot of that data, and that data is going to say exactly what we just changed with the new processing rows, just like this. Over here, so now nothing is new anymore, it's all processing. We can close this out and this out. And now the time is for automation. Now that we have the script running, we need to trigger the script regularly so that we can generate logs without us having to run the script manually every single time. And to do that, go over to the upper left over here where it says triggers. And when you click on that, you're going to be taken over to the triggers page for your script editor. And you'll create a add trigger, which my face is blocking right here, but it's like right here behind me. It says plus add trigger. You click on that, little pop-up will appear. You can choose the function that you want, which is going to be create log file. And then you can select the event source. For us, we want a time-driven value here. And just for the purposes of this video, let's set a minute timer. And we're going to say every single minute. You can do every 5 or every 30, whatever you want here. But let's save this. And this should trigger by itself once we hit the next minute. So while we're waiting for that to run, let's go back over to our code and let's do a quick recap on everything, just so that if you did have trouble following before, you can just listen to this part. This is like the too long didn't read part. Essentially what we did was we created one function to create the snapshot where we reference the spreadsheet that is connected to this script. And then we got the tab for sales. We got the data from that tab, and then we're returning that data in this function. After that, we created a function to get the destination folder that we want by using the ID, which you can get in the URL of that Google Drive folder. And then we created another function for creating that log file where within there, we called the two functions from above. We created a new date, and then we formatted that date into a more legible format for a file name. Then we went ahead and created a brand new file, a brand new Google Sheets file. And then we populated it with the data that we got from the create snapshot function. And once that file was populated, we took that file using the DriveApp.get file by ID, and we're just doing the log file get ID function here to get that ID. And then we're moving that over to the destination folder, which is determined by our get log folder function. So now when we go back over to our Google Drive folder, I think a minute at least has passed. You'll see here, perfect. So now we have another file that was just generated with the timestamp of 19 and 37 minutes. If we wait another minute, you'll find here that we get another log that's for the 38th minute, and then so on and so forth until we stop the trigger. But essentially that's it. This I hope was pretty helpful. You can imagine you can use this for many different things. If you have a spreadsheet that's constantly changing from day to day and you want to make sure you don't lose any information, this is also a great way to create backups of your data automatically if there's a lot of people in there. Of course, there's always version history and all that, but I find it useful to save that into another folder. That way you can go in and then figure out, like, did something wrong happen, or you just have that file to combine into another spreadsheet where you can list out or see historical trends for your data if you're doing like analytical data from Google Analytics or any type of analytics platform that you have. So let's go back over here real quick. Now we have the 38. It's running automatically. It's doing it as I'm talking. We don't need to do anything else now. And hopefully you find this useful and you can do it yourself. But of course, if you did find any issues with it, feel free to leave a comment in the section below. We're happy to help anybody who has any questions or had complications in trying to set this up. This is essentially how you would automate snapshots of your Google Sheets as the entire spreadsheet. You can do that too, and save that to a Google Drive folder so it's nice and neat, and you can just have folders just full of logs on whatever you're working on in that spreadsheet. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. It's the best way to support this channel and help us make sure that we can always create more content for you, cover more topics for you to help you, scrappy bootstrapper, to overcome some of the hurdles that you're facing and just make yourself more efficient. Which we have lots of videos coming out, so make sure to check out our YouTube channel. We got lots of videos up there If you don't see something that you're looking for, we have an email address where we're taking in feedback. That's feedback@bootstrapping.tools. So don't be shy. Send us an email. We'll be happy to take a look at that application for you. And because we're always putting out new content, make sure to hit that subscribe button and also the bell so you get notified when we release the next video. But I'm called Joe. This is Bootstrapping Tools. Let's build. This is the end of this video, but looking forward to seeing you in the next one. And we're out.